In this tutorial, we are going to talk about questions and question groups. So in the previous tutorial, we talked about paper and we've talked about assessment. Now we're going to talk about the question group and then questions under the question groups. First of all, why is there a concept of question groups? We can as well just decide to add all our questions under biology without having to group them into different groups. Now, the reason for this is most times if you are going to use our software for CBT, the number of computers you have in your lab is most likely going to be much less than the number of students sitting for that exam. Now, in order for us to simulate it such that there will be fairness, we can assign different students batch by batch to take the test. But it will be very, very unfair that those who took the test first are writing exactly the same question than those who are taking the tests subsequently, or those who are in different batches or different groups. For example, if batch A goes in and sees 3 questions, they can as well come out and reveal to batch B that, hey, I saw this question in number 1, I saw this in number 2, I saw this in number 3. In fact, they can memorize the answers and give it to them. So in order for us to combat that, we had to create different groups for different questions. Now, instead of us to just have all the questions under biology, we group them. So now if we're going to have like 3 batches of students sitting in our exam, we can as well have 3 groups. Now, to create a group is simple. It's just simply to, create a new group, and then you are going to have groups. So currently we have 1 group. So in a case where you have only 1 batch, you can just simply use 1 group. You don't have to add an extra group to it. Now, if you click on the group, you can see that group has some question group title and description. You can as well decide to edit the question group and change the title and description whenever you need. I also have what we call question group title visible. So if you want the candidate sitting for the exams, or the students, or the client, or the examinees to see the particular group they're writing, or the particular paper type. JAM usually calls this group concept paper type A or type B. You can use this feature to show it to them. If you don't want them to see it, it's fine. This can also be useful for security reasons. So not knowing the paper type you did would be hard for you to reveal to people that are writing the same exam, because they don't know the type you're going to see. So you can also do that. Then there's also a hide node feature. It's not very important for this tutorial. We're going to see more about the hide node when we're talking about the study materials concept. Now, after creating a question group, we also have some context menu items for question groups. For example, we can add questions, we can add many questions, we can edit and do so many other things. So let's do that for the group 2 we just created. So to add a question, you right click and add question. So that's how to add questions. Also, you can also add many questions. So for example, you can add between 2 to 100 questions, 1 to 100 questions, and you can see the questions here. Another property you can work with is edit. I've talked about that. You can copy, you can cut, you can duplicate a group, you can delete a group, you can preview a group, you can also renumber questions. So sometimes we may need to renumber. For example, if for some reasons we had to pick question 3 and put it in between question 1 and question 2, you see the number is now in a different order. One way to do that is to manually fix the numbering here for question 2 and question 3, or you can as well just choose to renumber here. So when you do the renumbering, it is going to restore the number order here. The next item on the context menu is sort questions. So you can as well sort questions by topic. So you note that you must have assigned each questions to a topic before you'll be able to sort them. So when we talk about questions, you'll see how we are going to assign questions to topics. So for example, under biology, if we have the 3 questions assigned to cell and ecology, as we indicated in biology topics, if you want them to be ascending, it means cell questions will come first, and ecology-related questions will come subsequently. In a similar way, we can sort by the question number. So this is also very useful. It is particularly useful if you are working with theory questions where the numbering system is a bit different. You can also sort the questions by question number, and then it would rearrange the order of the questions for you. You can also sort by difficulty level. So there's also a way for you to set difficulty. For example, for a question, this is question 2, you can see there is a field called difficulty level that has easy, medium, and hard. So in order for you to sort them such that maybe easy comes first before difficult ones, or the other way around, you can do that by right-clicking here and then doing sort question by difficulty level, increasingly difficult or decreasingly difficult. Now, the next item on the context menu is download questions. So PrepMate also has the ability for you to download questions from third parties. So on our servers, we've hosted questions from popular exams such as UTME and WASCII. So you can just quickly go there and download question. In subsequent tutorials, we're going to show you in full how the download question feature works. Then we also have another feature called export questions. So this is, you can export as PDF. All the questions here, you want to export them as a PDF file, a Word document, an Excel file, or a CSV for use later. You can do that with Venlearn software as well. Then the next thing we can do is import questions from Venlearn files. So I've already talked about this before. So you can import questions from another project, just like this new demo project. So in a similar way, we have been able to import papers and assessments. So you can as well import questions. So this time, if you're going to import questions, you're going to see how the questions, you are going to be able to select the questions, the number of questions you want to import. Automatically, they'll be added. So we're going to talk about importing questions in another tutorial in detail. The next item is import question from docx file. So there's also a way for you to do that. So if you want to add questions from a document, instead of using Excel or having to type the questions by yourself, you can also do that by, right-clicking and clicking on the import question from Excel file, and then choosing the Excel document, the Microsoft Word document. So, you can import from Excel, you can import from MS Word, but usually much better to use MS Word because it allows you to import both images, formulas, and other things. So we're going to talk about importing from Microsoft Word in another tutorial in full, so you're going to see it. So at this point, we have been able to talk about everything that has to do with groups. So we can now go to questions. So let's go back to this. Now, question is more like the most important thing for any assessment, because the essence of an assessment in the first place is to create questions that students will practice. So you can see here now that we have 3 questions under group 1. So we have 2 groups, group 1 and group 2. Group 1 has 3 questions, group 2 has 3 questions as well. So we're going to talk about the properties for questions. So first of all is question number. So question number is a concept that helps you, number your questions. So by default, as you create questions, it automatically assigns numbers to them. But if you have some reasons to use different numbers, you want to use Roman numerals, you want to use letters, you can change that from here. So you can decide that this question is A, this one is B, and C. So you can do that however you want. So it allows you to change your numbering the way you like. So when we talk about theory questions, you can see the reasons why question numbering is important and the concept of numbering questions for theory as well. Then we also have questions. So this is where we type our questions. We've talked about this in the past. We have options, option A down to D. Default, there are 4 options. And then we have explanation. So explanation is not necessary. So we don't have to enter an explanation. It will not prompt us an error, except we state that each question must have an explanation during the paper settings. Now, the next item is the other items under the sub-properties. So remember, when we first created a paper, we were able to choose the question type to be multiple choice, single select. Now, because we chose multiple choice single select, is a single option that we cannot change, because all the questions here must be one type of question. So that is why we have one property. So if, for instance, we go back to biology and change the question type to, say, mixed. So if we choose a mixed question, it means that we can now change the question type from here directly. So you can decide to choose whatever question type you want. So there are different question types for a question. We have multiple choice single select, multiple choice multi select, fill in the blank, and theory. So the system allows you, since you are doing a mixed question, so currently all the question has multiple choice single select because that's the default we selected originally. But let's say, for instance, question 2, we want question 2 to be multiple choice multi select. So if you look at the preview of this current question, you can see that you can only select one option at a time. But if we change it to multiple choice multi-select, it automatically changes the question. Now you can see that if you change a question, it sort of updates the property. Correct options. Now it's not telling us to choose one or more option that is correct, instead of just choosing one option. There are some new properties that it has added that is peculiar to this multiple choice multi-select. In the same way, if we choose fill in the blank, you're going to see some changes. Now, as we have chosen this, if you look at the preview, you can discover that it has changed from checkbox radio buttons to checkboxes. So we can select one or more options. Now we can go back and look at the other properties. Okay, so number of options 4. Correct options, you can set the correct options to be, multiple options. So let's say for this question, A and B is correct. You can do that and automatically it selects it for you, right? So you can also, there's also a concept called score weights, right? So this is peculiar to, so let's handle the multiple choice single select question type first. So before we go further. So currently, correct option, we've talked about it. You just pick your correct option. Okay. Then the next item is score weight. So score weight only tells the weight you are giving to the score. So score weight by default, all of them have a score weight of 1, meaning they have equal mark. But for some reasons, if you assign a score weight of 2 to question 2, it means that question 2 will have twice as much weight as question 1. So during marking, based on the number of total score, if it's 100, it means the system does the math and assigns twice as much score to question 2 than the other questions. So that's the concept of score weight. Score weight is not absolute, it is relative. So it doesn't mean that the score here will be 1. The score is based on the total score. Then we also have allow shuffle option. You can shuffle the options for this particular question. Okay, so if you want different questions for different users or different students or candidates to be shuffled, you can do it here. Then the other thing is question section. So remember we talked about sectioning. So you can assign sections to a question, especially if the order of sections is very important. So currently we have comprehension assigned to this. So you can also assign a topic to a question. So for example, we have cell ecology and basic ecological concepts. So the reason we have basic ecological concepts is I've done an import and then it has added a new third topic. So let's say for cell, you can assign this to cell and assign the other questions to different topics. So difficulty level 2 can also be assigned. Let's say this is an easy question. You can as well assign to a hard or a medium. So there's also a concept called case study. Now, case study is a way for you to, I think, explaining that will be better to use question 1. So sometimes, if, for example, this is English language or some other kind of papers that has you to study an example before you answer the question. Some people can decide to come and put the example as part of question 1, but most times that example applies to multiple questions. So to do that efficiently, you can use a case study concept. So currently, add case study is no, so there's no case study. If I pick yes, 2 new fields appear, the case study field as well as the case study label. Okay, so now the case study field is now like a field where you can put the instruction. For example, in English language, if you have a comprehension and you want to add, the comprehension applies to question 1, question 2, and question 3. Instead of you to add the same comprehension to each of those questions, which is going to add more spaces or, it's a redundant work, you can just add it to the very first question. So let's say the case study here is read, it's more like an instruction, read the following passage and answer answer the questions below. So let's say the case study applies to these 3 questions. So this is a way to do it. So when you have added a case study here, it's going to be seen as a case study. Now the default title is case study, but for instance, this is an instruction, or this is a passage, or this is a comprehension. So you can change the case study label to be whatever reflects it. So you can say this is a passage, right? A passage, or you can call it comprehension. So whatever it is, you can do that. Right, so that's the essence of case study. Now it doesn't stop there. So if you have added a case study here and you want the same case study to be applied to question 2 and question 3, all you just need to do is to add the case study for question 2, and then instead of you to retype it here, there is a concept of importing case study. Just click on this, copy from previous. So to copy the passage from the previous case study and append it here. So when you're viewing it in the client, you view it as a passage. You can do the similar thing for question 3 and then copy it. So what it means now, we only have to add case study one place and then copy it across the different application. So whatever question does not concern the case study, it wouldn't affect it. You don't have to copy the case study. So that's how case study works. Then another property is hide node. Hide node is not so necessary for assessment. We'll talk about more of it in study materials. So that's that for the question type single select. So there's also another question type called multi-select. So let's choose that for question 2. So we can change the question type here automatically. It has changed to a multi-select question. So you can see that we have radio buttons here. So there are some properties that are peculiar to multi-select, like correct options. So remember, we have set it before, so it still restores the order. So here we have to select one or more option that is the correct option. Score weight still applies. Enable partial scoring is unique to multiple choice, multi-select. So what it means is that if, say, A and B is the answer and the user end up entering only A, we can still give them a partial score. So instead of us to give them full 1 mark, we can say since they got 1 of 2, they will get only 1 mark, half mark instead. But if partial scoring is disabled, we don't want to give them, as long as they don't get the exact 2 answers that we have provided for them, A and B, even if they got A only or got B only, we are still going to fail them. So enable partial scoring, no, means that there's nothing like partial scoring. If you don't get A and B correctly as it is, you're going to fail it. So partial scoring is more like a pardon. So if they choose B answer correctly, they can be given half mark, or if they choose A correctly, they can be given half mark. Though there are some questions that requires you to enter the exact 2 answer. So in that case, you can decide that enable partial scoring will be false. Remember, you can always read more about the what each feature means by hovering over the question mark arrow. Say applicable to multiple choice, multi-select. Question tells whether or not to give partial score to candidates who choose some, not all, the correct answers. So shuffle option, we've talked about it. Question topic, we've talked about that. Difficulty level, talked about that. Add case study and all. So that's that about multiple choice, select question. So let's go to fill in the blank. So fill in the blank question is also a very unique kind of question. So you can see that the fill in the blank question still maintains the case study, and then there's now an answers field, and then there's now a explanation field. So it doesn't have option. So I didn't talk about the option. You can actually change your number of options here. Let's say you make these 5 options. Automatically, it adds an option E, and then you can decide to enter an option E. So all these properties are unique to the particular question, but let's change it back to 4 so that the error is gone. So I wanted to just show you can change the number of options you want here, and automatically it adds more fields to it. So we're talking about filling the blank. So filling the blank question is also possible. So if you look at the preview, you can see that this is the question as long as the blank. So you read the question and you enter whatever it is in the blank. So there's another tutorial we're going to talk or deep dive into filling the blank. It's a very advanced question type we added to this point. But for the sake of this tutorial, we'll just make it simple. So filling the blank also have some properties that are unique to it. For example, so this is the question and this is the blank. So you can see in the preview now that the question is after the blank and there's no space, so you can add a space to it. Let's say you want the blank to be down. All you just need to do is to press enter, and then the blank comes down. You can add as many spacing as you want. It depends. So the formatting is really applied to that. Okay, so there's also another field called answer. So this is where you now choose your answer. So if you go to manage answers, there's currently no answer entry here, so you can add an answer. Let's say the answer to this question is cat, right? CAT. So you can assign full mark to whoever entered this correctly, right? You can decide that the type is a simple. So simple means it's going to do a one-to-one matching, right? Advanced means it's going to do a regular expression. So we're going to talk about filling the blank question in detail in a different tutorial. There's a lot to it. So when you click an answer, so the answer is cat. So whenever the examinee types cat, it gets the correct answer correctly. So if you cancel it, you can see the preview now. And the answer to this question can just be cat, and it means it's correct. There's also some other configuration that can be done for filling the blank. Sometimes you may want the candidate to let's say you want to pardon them if they type cats with S. So for example, somebody may decide to type cats. Cats is still pretty much correct, but maybe you want to penalize them and give them half mark. So there's also a way to do it. Or you want to give them 1/3 mark, or you want to give them a full mark, a quarter mark. So it depends on what you want. So if they type cats, you can give them a full mark, or you can give them half mark, and then you answer. So with that now, you have 2 entries. So there are currently 2 correct answers. Again, you may also want to ask, what if they change case? So they type cats in capital letter, or their first C is capital letter. So there's also a setting for that. By default, it ignores, what do they call it? Hold on, let me show you. Allow case-sensitive matching. So it's no. What it means is that whether it's small letter or capital letter you type, it will mark it correctly. But if you want it to be very strict, you change the case-sensitive matching to yes. So what it means is that it must be exactly how it is. But by default, it allows you to type in any type. You can use all caps, you can use small letters, or you can use a mix of it to still give you the correct answer. So we'll talk about more on these properties soon. So there's also another thing we can do here. Let's delete these cards so that for simplicity. So there's also other option. If you view and edit this, you can say set answer character field character length to yes. So what it means is that it is going to give you 3 boxes to enter. So it's a much simpler question. This can be used more. This can be more useful for maybe kids that are taking the exam. So if the answer is cat, they can see 3 boxes and then they can write C8C. Right, so the fill in the blank gives you that capability. I mean, there's a lot on fill in the blank, so we're going to talk about fill in the blank more in details in another tutorial. Now, let's talk about the properties for fill in the blank question. Now, you can see that the first is question type. We've talked about this. You cannot always switch to different question type. Now, the other thing is remove question before blank. So sometimes you want to make sure the blank comes first, then questions come later. In order for you to do that, you can just remove the question before blank. For example, if I do this, yes, the question is gone, and then if you look at the preview, we just have the blank, and then we can decide to add questions after blank. So if we go back to the listing, there's also another property called add question after blank. So let's say we choose yes, it's going to add a question field immediately after the blank, and then you can now put the question for that field. So if you look at the preview, you will see that the blank comes first, then the question comes next. So we can add a spacing in order for us to make it clearer. Yes, so that's how it works. So that's the idea. Then the next item is add answer options. So for example, if you want some fill in the blank questions to have like options, you can pick yes, and this time they're going to ask you the different options you want it to be. So let's say option A is A, option B is B, option C is C, option D is D. So when you do that, if you look at the preview, the field will change now, and then you'll be able to select an option. So this is also important if you want a blank to have an option. Perhaps in the passage, you want them to be able to answer and choose an option. This is actually different from multiple choice multi-select or multiple choice single select question. So let's cancel that. Add answer options, no. Then the next thing we're going to do is score weight. So score weight is similar. It's just a weight you're assigning to the score for this particular question. So question section is similar. We've talked about it. Question topic, we can decide to assign a topic to this question. Say ecology. Difficulty level, we can decide to assign a difficulty level easy. Add case study. We talked about the case study before. We can change the case study label. Then stripe white spaces. So also, if they are filling a blank, sometimes they can add a space before and after their answer. For example, the answer was cat. Someone may decide to type space before cat or space after cat. So in order for you to still pardon them, stripe white spaces by default is yes, meaning that if there's any space before the actual answer or after the actual answer, as long as the actual answer is correct, it ignores it and still scores them correctly. However, if you want to be very strict such that with spaces they can still fill a question, you can choose no. So that's what it means. So you can also read more about the stuff here. I've talked about ignore multiple spaces. Also, sometimes there are some questions that have space. For a typical example, let me change this edit. So let's change this to no. Let's say the answer is 3 years. The answer to this question is 3 years. Right? So somebody may decide to add multiple spaces 3 years like this. So what that ignore multiple spaces means is that if they put multiple spaces after the years, they can still be pardoned. Otherwise, you may want to fail them. So that's what it means. So we're going to ignore and change that. So ignore multiple spaces means that anywhere they have to put space, if they put more than one space, we'll just ignore it and give them the answer. However, if we want to be strict, we just change it to no. Allow case-sensitive matches. I've talked about it. No. It means that if the answer is cat, you can decide to type cat in capital letter, it will still score you. You may decide small letter, a mix of both. As long as these letters are there, A, B, C, C-A-T, it will give you the answer. However, if you want to be very strict with case sensitivity, you pick yes. Then the other options is hide node. So that's that about the fill in the blank type of question. Another kind of question that we should talk about, let me add a new question, is theory. So this time now, we are now prompted the question type because the system automatically sees that is a mixed type. So in order for us to know the question type it should create, it will now prompt us to enter the type. In this case, we want to do a theory question. So theory question is almost similar to fill in the blank. The only stuff is that theory has a what you see what you get editor field that students can type the answer. So for example, the question may be something like this, and then the answer to the question may you as the admin can just put the answer. You can format it your way. So theory is different from filling the blank in that theory allows you to type an answer in full. You can edit the answer. Is not so we currently there's no way to sort of mark theory. So the teacher have to review the theory answers and then assign scores to them. But we're looking to improve that with AI in coming updates. So that's that about theory. There are pretty much many similar properties with theory, so we wouldn't have to go through it. So another thing we'll talk about for each question is their context menu. So if you right click on a question, you can add question next to this. We have talked about it. You also ask the type of question, and then when you choose the type of question, it adds it. You can copy, you can cut, you can duplicate, you can preview, you can even renumber. So that's that about question, and see you in the next one.